your thoughts? Did these guys take a step backward? And I thought the line looked actually a little bit better when they moved Carson Barnhart back to right tackle, and they had Ladarius Henderson there at left at
Yeah, I
times.
was watch yeah, I was watching Ladarius play at left tackle and Barnhart.
Hmm.
I think there might be something there. It's a familiar spot, Barnhart at right.
Right.
And here's the thing that stuck out to me is like, okay, week 3, are we really switching this around, this combination? And I guess yes, the answer is yes. We're still playing around with this proper tackle lineup. And I tell you what, it's got to be set by now. You can't be into week 4 or 5 and still rotating your tackles. You've got to get that offensive line set. So hopefully, whatever Coach Moore's combination is going to be going into Big Ten football season now, this is it. I I thought with Darius played just fine at left tackle, and Barnhart obviously can play right. Um, Hitting in there in the first half at right tackle, and some of the leakage that we had in pass protection, and we got a quarterback running around. As a unit, this is not where I had hoped it would be in week 3. I'm still not hitting any kind of panic button, but it should be awfully tight, right? It's sort of related to an NFL season where you go through your preseason and we're relating the September schedule to mixing some guys in, seeing who can play, what the proper combinations are. But here going into the end of September, going into Big Ten season, I would think this starting five would be all set. We'd be ready to go. We clearly know who's in the interior there with Nugent and our 2 veteran offensive guards. It's time to get this tackle situation set, and let's go.
Yeah, and I thought Barnhart looked more comfortable at right. And am I wrong? Is it? I didn't watch it specifically enough on film to say, okay, he's better over here. Just to the eye test, it looked like they were better when Barnhart was on the right side of the line.
It's hard to say. I'd have to go back and watch the productivity and say, okay, is he moving better out of that right-handed stance? Does he have better relationship with Zinter over there on the right side and pass protection? And really break that down. It's hard to tell from just watching a TV copy last night watching the football game. So, but it clearly there's got to be a comfort level. He's been practicing and playing it for the last 2 or 3 years there. So, and just this fall playing over there at left. It's not that he can't play left. It's just that, like you're saying, he might be more comfortable at right. And if Ladarius, who was a left tackle before he got to Michigan, if he can step in there and do it, then let's do it. And obviously Trente comes in on the extra tight end position yesterday. I saw him in there at the on the edge of the offense, and I think he brings a little bit of a spark. He presents a problem for a combination block out there, but obviously, he's a veteran guy who's played a lot of football, so he's a plus out there. Michigan has a top 7 offensive line group, right? There's clearly a top 5 in my mind of talent. And then you've got your extra tackle in the game, being Trente or Ladarius, whoever it's going to be. And then you've got Al Hadi in there in the middle, who can maybe move around and be your next guard in the game. So it's time to settle that thing in, and let's get down to winning this Big Ten.
Yeah, and it's not unprecedented for them to make moves this late in the season. If you look at David Boss in 2004, remember they're like, okay, we're not good enough at center. We're going to move
Mhm.
him from guard to center, and boom, they started taking off. They played much
Yep.
better against Iowa. You didn't have a problem anymore. So it's okay to tinker because you know what? Unless you really screw up, and it's possible, man. If you look around the country, there are almost no sure things unless you're Washington going up to Michigan State. There are almost no sure things in college football. You look at Alabama struggling 3-3 with South Florida at halftime. Georgia was down 10 at home to South Carolina for a while. So
Mhm.
those teams are better than Bowling Green, or at least South Carolina is. But
Mhm.
you know what? This is one of those things where you don't have to be perfect. And Lloyd Carr always said it's not a game of perfect. But 2 things I will say is that J.J. McCarthy's not going to play that badly again. I don't have much hesitation in saying that. He was off. Something was wrong. I'm sure it was a combination of things. And if that game is 14-0, Skene, if they don't throw that pick, I think the game takes on a completely different tenor there, and they probably go on to win the thing 40-something to 3 or whatever it is. So there's that. Instead, it wasn't. And some of the things that in the running game, I was a little bit, I would say, I felt better about Skene. I thought that Blake Corum ran harder and looked like the Blake Corum of old. His feet were moving. I thought he was a little bit more powerful, put his shoulder down a few times. And I thought there was a little bit more push up front. Am I wrong there?
No, you're not wrong there. Corum clearly is the better performing back of the 2 that we have right now. Corum is finding the seams, finding the creases, accelerating the feet, and getting more first downs and better yardage than Edwards is right now. It's just a reality. And I don't know what it is about the specific play calling that's going on in there with the different backs that with when Edwards in there and Corum is not. But right now, there's a clear number one in the backfield. That's Blake Corum in my mind. And so Edwards has got to find a way to either be patient and find more creases, or the coaching staff has to find a different way to get this kid the football on the football field because he's clearly talented and a threat to a defense. But it's good to see Corum back in there playing the way he is because obviously we're going to need him. But we need to have a happy backfield too, Ballas. You got two guys there that want that football a lot, and that's a balancing act that this coaching staff's going to have to deal with for the balance of this season.
Yeah, and Blake Corum is the better running back, and I said that at the beginning of the year. And it's not to discount what Donovan Edwards has done for Michigan. I just think he's a different kind of back. And if you look at him as a pass catcher, when they have him on the field at the same time, those guys are dangerous together, and I like it. But he was frustrated. There's no question about it. He was talking to some people I know, and he said, "Man, people are going to think I'm no good, and it's I'm trying to do what I can here."
No, when you say, or anybody else, or myself, or anybody says Corum is the better back, that doesn't mean that Donovan is not good.
Of course.
That means he's damn good. It just means that Corum is performing better right now. It's a luxury position. So it's not a downgrade or a negative for Edwards. So it's but I can understand this frustration. These young man wanted to have an incredibly productive season, and so far here three games in, it's not quite where he wants it to be. So it's on him to fix that.
Yep, it's on all of them to fix it, and the coaches would say the same. So we'll see where it goes next week. But I like Rutgers coming in as a test. It almost feels like the season's beginning next week, Skene. And this is the kind of opponent that I would like to see them play in the non-conference, frankly.
It always does. And so over the years, we've watched Michigan now, well, certainly since I left and while I was there, there's always a reset button of some sorts when the Big Ten season starts. And this will be no different this year. And maybe it's a luxury position that you just have Rutgers. It's only Rutgers, which is a dangerous thing, right? And you're not starting off with, Penn State or something like that in a season like this. But I would expect there'll be a rejuvenated enthusiasm come next weekend to open up this Big Ten title defense campaign that this football team now gets to take on. And so we should see more enthusiasm. We should see a tighter effort, a cleaner effort. And if we don't, Ballas, now I'm going to start raising that yellow flag and saying, okay, maybe this team is not a top 5 team. But, hey, speaking of top 5s, we coming into the season, we want to talk about offenses and where we thought this offense needed to be to challenge for the national title. Through week 3, passing offense in college football right now, Michigan is ranked 61st. And rushing offense, Michigan is ranked 68th.
Yeah.
Not where we want to be after 3 weeks against these opponents.
Not
I wouldn't have guessed it. I would not have said so.
No. And you know what? We've kind of made excuses for them, 2 weeks in a row. I'm not making any excuses for them this week. It just wasn't good enough. It was sloppy. And maybe one excuse that you didn't have your head coach there. But at the same time, I remember when Bo Schembechler wasn't there for a bowl game and Gary Moeller stepped in, and that thing looked like a well-oiled machine in the Hall of Fame Bowl. I think that was before you got there, if I'm not mistaken, after the 1987 season, the year before you got there. They looked pretty darn good. So,
and that's another thing, right? So Coach Harbaugh's coming back. Big Ten season starts. So hopefully all falls into place, and the game day, situation without having your head football coach there, that's obviously gone. I'm sure he'll come in fired up, ready to go. It's a season opener for him. First time he gets to be on the sideline with his team now in this year. So I think that bodes well for Michigan, and what a great coaching opportunity for him and his coaching staff to come in, and Coach Harbaugh can come into the building today and tomorrow and probably light into those guys pretty good about the performance they just laid an egg on the light flickering night at the new reveal of the fancy light show at Michigan Stadium. They laid an egg. They didn't lay an egg. They won the football game pretty handily, but
they kind of laid an egg.
Well, they won. It was clunky. It was a clunky win.
Yeah, and I've seen my share of those, and things have been okay. That's the hilarious part is you see the end of the world posts on the message boards, right? We'll never win another game. God, we suck. The one year, remember when they beat Rutgers a couple of years ago and they had to hold on for dear life, and everybody was like, this team blows. And guess what? They went out and they won the Big Ten in
Yeah.
impressive
I
fashion.
think we struggled against Maryland last year.
Yes, it was
Pretty bad.
34-27 or something like that. And
Yeah.
now the one thing that concerns me, and going back to that game, it's like, okay, Maryland kind of punched them in the mouth, and you kind of felt like that was their first taste of competition last year too. So Rutgers is going to come in here amped up, man. I guarantee you, they are not going to be afraid to play that game. Doesn't mean they're going to win, but Michigan's going to have to match their intensity. And I think getting Harbaugh back at this point is going to be good for them. So, but I do want to. I asked Doug Karsh, the voice of Michigan football, what he thought about this team, and he said, it's like probably one of the following. He said maybe they're just not as good as we thought they were, and I don't think he thinks that, and he didn't say that, right?
But that's so that question right there, Ballas.
Right.
Is this team that's starting to come into focus? It's starting to become a more legitimate question when you see performances like we saw. Maybe this team isn't the number 2 team in the country,
but not the one that we have a definitive answer to. And again,
correct.
if you look
The
around,
jury is still out.
Right, which brings us to number 2, where he says this is simply a typical good team with endless potential and a lot of work to be done. Look around college football is what he said, and I was like, absolutely. Again, look at the top 5 last week. Nobody was very impressive. Ohio State, pulled away from Youngstown State, in the second half. Was it Youngstown State they played last week?
Was it Western?
No, it was Western Kentucky. Yeah, they pulled away in the second half, but they look a lot like Michigan did in the first 3 weeks. And then he said, number 3, maybe they're bored and truly showing signs of missing the head coach. And he said, then maybe it's a combo of all 3. And that's where I am. I think it's a bunch of things going on right now. But there's no question in my mind when I look at the defense, like Scott Loeffler said, you've got 2 first-round picks on the defensive line, right? And then you look at Junior Colson, you look at Michael Barrett, you look at Hausman. They're missing a couple guys in the secondary. And when they get those guys back, this defense is going to be really, really hard to move the ball on. So there's that. And then I look at the offensive line, and you got a couple of guards. Trevor Keegan had not been playing to his potential. I don't know how he played yesterday. I'm going to lean on you for that one. But these guys can play at a higher level. We know that the receivers are pretty good. You saw the acrobatic play that Cornelius Johnson made yesterday. Roman Wilson is looking pretty good running his routes. Now, we got to see them against better competition. And then I look at the backs, and I know what the backs can do, and I know what J.J. McCarthy can do. So I know the talent is there. It's just about putting it all together.
Yeah, there's no question. So we sit there, you just listed off all this talent that we have in this offensive huddle, plus the guys that come off the sideline to complement this starting 11, no matter who the combination is. So it's just like, fellas, get this going here, man. Yeah. It's not a question of talent or capability or even experience.
Yep.
Even in the case of Ladarius at left tackle, this kid's played a lot of college football.
Yep.
And so it's time to get going here. And I think Karsh is probably onto something there with the combination of all 3. And to the point that he made, if you look across college football, you see a lot of teams late in September playing a bunch of easy scheduled, schools to get through a September cleanly, with the exception of a few that went and won some tough games. Maybe it is just, that time of year where it's like, okay, let's just take a deep breath and let's reset the button here and get going.
And Jim Harbaugh teams generally almost always improve as the year goes on. And by the end of the year, they're playing some really good football. The Ohio State game notwithstanding, and that was a lot on their defense and their philosophies in that game, which they have cleaned up. So I really don't have a whole lot of concern yet, especially number 1 about the defense. That defense is going to keep them in every game. It's probably going to win most of the games on the schedule alone for them, because teams are just not going to be able to score a lot on them. Obviously, the games that everybody's looking at are Penn State and Ohio State, and defense, you're not going to win with defense alone in those games. But number 2, there's no question in my mind that offense is going to improve. And all of a sudden, J.J. McCarthy is not dog crap here, guys. This guy was completing balls at an 87% clip to lead the nation. And everybody else was playing crappy competition too. So you can talk about the competition, but he was throwing darts in there. Bad games happen every now and then. It's not a game of perfect, as Lloyd Carr said. So he's going to get better. So that's why my concern level isn't all that high. Again, if we're having this conversation after Rutgers where, they squeak by or, win a 3-4 point game or something like that, then maybe it's going to be different.
Yeah, there's some concern floating around in the air in my mind, but not panic. If this offense doesn't tighten up, it's going to be a problem down the road. The good news is that we don't have to go to Penn State next week or the week after that. Soon tight. Thanks for hitting the mute button. That was very kind of you.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Yeah, didn't want to get anything on you there.
Yeah, thank you, man. So it is, again, I think for us fans and observers of this football program and the people that love this football program, it's like, okay, yeah, we expect, these roster or the schedule that we see here to be covering these games by 40 points and blowing them out and the game being over by the first quarter. And we talked about this for the last 3 weeks. When it doesn't go perfectly, it's easy for us fans to go, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And yet, in about another month from now, if we're still undefeated, no one's going to care. We're not going to
No,
care.
no,
And
I
these passing now, that the statistics are what they are. I do believe that this passing efficiency and this running efficiency, we can't live in the middle of the pack in all of college football
mm-mm.
and expect to repeat as Big Ten champions and go on and chase the big trophy. So that performance, the statistics have to get better, and you do that, Ballas, by doing what? Put your foot in the right place at the right time when you come out of your stance.
Yeah,
Don't look at the big picture. Work on your technique and your individual responsibilities as a guard, tackle, center, tight end. Doesn't matter what it is. Do the fundamentals, and the rest will take care of itself.